Have any idea about what price you should be selling at, or are you making money, losing money? So I'm gonna go through this, and we've got some resources. We've got this workbook here. We've got some things we'll show you, make sure it's kind of at the basic level to go through, but there's also this pocket crop record thing here. And while it's talked about, you want something that would survive getting wet, So actually, we have this here with that in mind. This is water-resistant paper here on these pocketbook things here, so they'll actually survive. If they do get a little wet out in the field and whatnot. We'll go through those resources for you just a little bit, and I'm just going to put a little bit here about some things think about, especially getting started, and even after you've been doing it for a while. Look here at these two scenarios you have on the left and the right. There's a lot of how you get to where you're ending up there. That all relates to where you start with your plan, right? In terms of kind of what you envision. And like Yogi Berra said here, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else, right? So where someplace else is, I don't know, but if you don't have a plan in terms of where you're going, you're going to get there. So records help us to stay on track in terms of where we want to be and look at things. But these are some reasons here we put down for not keeping records, right? Everybody's got a reason why you wouldn't want to have records, right? One could be you're just waiting for your neighbor to try it. Big thing is you probably say, I don't have time, right? It's a lot of time if you're trying to track how much labor you're putting into the different activities of your operation, right? Time to keep track of where this fertilizer is going to. What crop is it going to? Where is the fertilizer coming from? All that stuff takes a lot of time. This one here, that's more fun. My lender guessing on my ability to repay, but probably more likely I don't want my spouse to know where the money goes, right? As to how much is actually involved, maybe in an operation. And one thing we're here to help you with, if you're not that organized, hopefully these tools here will give you a little bit of feel and get more organized as where you might be. This is an example here of some produce at a farmer's market up in the Prescott area. So the records give them an idea in terms of what they can produce, when and where. Also, what kind of enterprises are best. You don't want to be like the picture with all the onions there, and that's all they've got to sell. So, like I said, Miles was talking about this. You don't want to get where you have too much of one product that you can't move it in the market, because what's going to happen with there? That's going to be one more than likely just compost. So you have to keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, especially probably not so much with hydroponics there, but when you're planting out in your gardens and whatnot, you have to think of like the rotation that you have here. And this is a snapshot out of a publication that just shows you, cucumbers and pumpkin squash and watermelons are all kind of in the same family. So you don't want to plant, next any of those, within like the next 3 years on that same ground. And I know some growers just claim even with watermelons it'd be more years than that. If they have enough ground available, they will go, longer than that. But it kind of depends on what you're planting as well too. Because in countries where land is more scarce, like Japan and Italy, they resort to do more like grafting. So they'll, have a different rootstock in the scion, so that it's more adaptable to the diseases and whatnot, and then you can plant more intensively on that. So, but that's another reason to have records, just to keep track well, what would be my benefit if I didn't have to rotate so frequently? You know? The other reason, of course, is the feds can always be looking at you, right? In terms of what you've got for records and whatnot, especially your financial records. How long do you have to keep them? It kind of depends a little bit, but if you're doing fraudulent activities, you probably want to get rid of them right away, but the IRS says there's no limit on how long you're supposed to keep them, so depends on what perspective you're looking at in terms of the records. So if you don't file a return, it says you're supposed to keep those records forever, but I imagine most people that didn't file a return don't have any records anyway, or they're all destroyed. So that's according to the IRS. Miles talked a lot about food safety. And there's the USDA organic stamp there as well, see on that box. So that requires an awful lot of records to go the organic route. It requires, you do have more records to keep in terms of everything that's been applied and what's acceptable and what's not. The one thing that a lot of students find surprising is that organic does not have a restriction that no pesticides can be used. Like organic can use pesticides. In many cases, growers in UMIL will tell you that the organics have more pesticides than the non-organic. Why is that? Because the products that they're using are not really that effective. So in terms of the amount that's put on, it can be a lot more, and more applications in particular than the products that are grown conventionally. But just to be educated on the different things and what it means. But there's a rules that I think Miles referred to, but I think there's currently even 20,000 pages or so of different rules and things to go through with just organic. So it's like an awful lot. But there's programs to help even the small grower as well too. But it's a cost share and it's not 100%. So that's one of the reasons though where a lot of small producers don't do it, because of the cost in terms of the certification, bring somebody in. Plus also you have to keep track of everything a lot more intensive on your records. So everybody has one of these workbooks here, crop records. It just kind of shows the different tabs that are on there. One is to just kind of describe your operation a bit. There's the daily logs, the harvest records, and we'll kind of go through these quickly here. Your operation description here. Put down some of the important contact information. You always need to be thinking about it as, like Miles said, what if something happens to me, what are some things, key contact people, that'd be good to have down that somebody could go to? That's always good, because you want to think about, well, how can I, especially if you have employees working for you and whatnot, is there somebody that can jump in and be able to at least pick up on the things so that you're not totally indispensable. Keep your inventory of everything, your plots and fields, all that's all kind of good to put out. Plot out your acreage and whatnot, where you'd be growing things, what you have one year, how you move around. Miles, when he's on your greenhouse there, with hydroponics, it's all pretty much the same. One harvest and the next harvest, the same medium and everything. That's the beauty of that kind of system. But when you're growing in the soil and whatnot, you have to think about the crop that's there and the susceptibility of the different microbes and things in the soil. And so if you have watermelon one year, you have a great crop. You go back and you think, I did this in my yard in Tucson too. First year, man, boy, we had watermelons just all over the place, Well, I'll throw a few more out there. Next year, what happened? Maybe we have one watermelon. It's just, in part just because of the whole, it doesn't take long for, kind of the diseases that build there to really kind of take off. And, that was the watermelon. The other thing, equipment. Keep some records on those. There's things in your workbook there for that. And also, we have tried to make some of these categories with the pocket workbook and the three-ring binder together so that the daily activity log, harvest records, and financial records, you can kind of take them and move them from one to the other. And I'll go through a little bit on that. So like the pocket crop book here, you can see there's some things there with regards to just the date, where it's grown. Those small columns up there, have, point it over here, but you can go to the top up over there, you can see, whether you're growing like in a greenhouse, hoop house, weeks to harvest, that kind of information, basic information to get you on track. Here, if you did any treatments, you can put that in the tree binder here, just fertilizer, chemical, any comments, just to think about things that you're putting into the crop, when you put it in, the active ingredient, and this daily event log here in the pocket crop book here is the way you can track a lot of the operations that you do for that plot or the field part of it in terms of what you put on as well. There, and that's just this here screen here. That can also fit into the three-ring binder if you want to, put a more complete set in there. Ideally, it'd be great if we all had an app, I guess, where we were just carrying around on our phone and it'd tell us, oh, you're working in the carrots right now, so you put in 20 minutes there, and then you're over in the spinach, and we're working there 20 minutes, but we just don't have that, or I don't know the availability of that right now. Another thing, if you're indoors, precipitation is going to really, something you're really looking at, but if you're on the livestock side in particular, precipitation is everything out on the rangeland, but even here on the small-scale garden, precipitation is good to keep a handle on. When the storms come in and whatnot. It seems like oftentimes in like Yuma, where they only get like 3 inches a year, and they claim that it all comes when they don't want it. They'll get trying to harvest inevitably, and they get a big rain, and they have those tractors out there 2 feet deep, trying to get through cumulative precipitation. This year, we're really behind, in part because we started out pretty wet, but then the monsoon season just didn't have anything, and then we just had rain the other day, but other than that, it's been a long period of dry. So the cumulative precipitation there gives you a feel for things. Harvest, everybody likes to harvest, so keep track of those records. This is an example of a high tunnel that was up in the Sholo area. They put things together, and basically people could come in and harvest. They just wanted them to weigh, what they were taking out, so that they knew how much they were producing. But unfortunately, it wasn't well enough known or whatever, but they weren't even getting people to come by and get all of the produce that was there. So, when you think of your competition, it could be the people around you, but it could also be like some of the nonprofits like here, where they put this together and, they couldn't even, essentially give it away. Well, you had to harvest it to do it, but, at certain times of the year, they couldn't get it all out. So, that's something to keep in mind. But the harvest is important there, just keep track of what you have, and also the price, the percent that's marketable. I know Miles noted how one thing you liked about the lettuce was that you could pretty much market almost everything you produce for the most part. Some commodities you just are going to have a lot of loss. And also, if we look at like lettuce grown in the Yuma in the field area, how much of that is typically harvested or marketable? I guess marketable is kind of harvestable in the same way in many ways. But typically, about half of the time, a lot of the produce is left in the field. Why is that? because the price isn't there. I mean, the labor to harvest is probably 80% of the cost. And if it doesn't pay the harvest crew in terms of the current price, they'll just leave it in the field and plow it under, you know. So, you know, if you can have contracts in place and be able to, you know, kind of predict your production to where you don't have that loss, that can help on both sides there. Just some things to keep in mind with financial record keeping, you know, keeping your expenses, receipts, the business transactions. You want to be able to kind of put things from a monthly basis into an annual basis so that you can estimate the farm profit and also drill down to what are your most profitable different things. Like Miles was showing in terms of, you know, he was going off of the prices there that you can probably get, you know, which ones of these are going to be the most profitable? Well, you can see when the price is right down to pretty close to what his total cost of production is, he doesn't have a whole lot of margin to work with. But when you had a price that's like 5 times, you know, what his production costs are, that gives you a margin, something to work with there. So that's one reason why we have that. So in the back of your books here, there's these even envelopes to help you get started to kind of categorize your receipts in different areas. So you can keep track of the expenses and whatnot. These are helpful for your taxes. So in the 3-ring binder, you'll find the categories like this kind of fit right in line with Schedule F on the income tax. With regards to receipts, I guess I just note that there's probably, if you can think of redundancy in your receipts, like you have your original receipt here, but if you also have like a business checking, it'll give an example or provide output in regards to this. So you don't see it right away, but some of the same units, things over here on the right are also here on the left. And that just gives you another way of tracking and mapping up with what's on there. So income and expenses, you know, trying to sort out in terms of what are the different enterprises becomes a challenge. That's one reason why we have those in the record book there. You know, the third step, where you want to take things and try to summarize it in terms of, you know, everything for the month and for the year. At the back of the book there, it has these forms here where you can kind of summarize your journal entries. So for the first year, you know, it's not going to probably be that enlightening, but after you have a couple of years, you can kind of see where the expenses go in and the revenues come out. Especially if you're in the livestock operation, you know, you kind of see that where you're having expenses kind of come in all year long, and then you sell the animal, you know, get one check. It's not like you're selling multiple times throughout the year. Like if you're having vegetables, you can be getting, you know, multiple crops throughout the year to harvest. Whereas if it's a cow-calf operation, typically just have the sales that once a year. So that's, well, other than, you know, you might have some cold cows and off sales, but for the calf crop, pretty much just once a year. The income statement, you want to get there so you can sum up, you know, what are all your expenses and your revenues to get to that bottom line. And then sort out that in terms of, you know, you have a bottom line, and how much of that bottom line came from the lettuce, how much came from the carrots, or, you know, maybe something even came from the, you know, the corn maze or something like that. So those are all kind of things to keep in mind there. Anybody know about Duncan Family Farms? So we talked about, you know, starting small relatively, but and then going. They're on they started on the West Valley. They're out there by Buckeye. Yeah, and you know, about 25 years ago, I think they were doing a lot of school tours, and they were also doing kind of like the farm festival kind of things. And they're, does anybody ever happen to go to their place? It's not there now, and part why. Does anybody remember why? What happened? So they were right on the runway for the Edwards Air Force Base out there in terms of their farm. So it's state land that they have leased there, but they were right there. And so basically, they said that, well, this is too high risk because this was after 9/11. Basically, they were saying that, you know, this having all these people out here was just too high of a risk. But anyway, they kind of took a lot of the things that they learned from selling directly to people and doing a lot of these. And they're like one of the largest organic producers now, not just in Arizona, but in the West. They've spread out a lot over. But one of the things, even back, you know, I think this was like almost 20 years ago, Kathleen was telling me, one of the things they had their employees do at the end of every day was try to allocate how much time they spent to the different enterprises in terms of whether they were working on, you know, the organic greens that they had, or they were working on the school tours. You know, they would always try to categorize that. And I think that really did help them to be able to grow to the point where they are today. They didn't own a lot of land like a lot of farms. It was all leased in terms of pretty much state land. They own some now, a fair bit. But at the time, they were basically, you know, just operating on state land. They didn't make their money off of the land, per se. And they made it all off of their farming and the agriculture. This is an example of an operation in California. It actually used to grow nursery products for planting, landscaping, and whatnot. They turned it into where they're trying to grow strawberries, vine ripened tomatoes, and different things there. So, you know, when you think of a facility, you can think of a wide range of things that could potentially be grown, you know, in that facility. It may not necessarily always stay the same, you know, over, you know, this is like a 20-year span, but it could even be a 5-year span where, you know, you can shift around. This is Perry Farms in Nevada. It's kind of interesting. They go back, way back in terms of potatoes. They still do a lot of potatoes. And you probably might even see some of their potatoes in the different stores. They're pretty common. But they were noting, you know, like 10 or 15 years ago that they felt they really needed to diversify out. And so they did get into some of the leafy greens. And, you know, it just shows that, and they were doing some organically as well too, just to try to provide to that market to be to where they could make it. You know, so like organics, you know, doesn't work for everybody, but there's like some growers, like say even the apple growers in southeastern Arizona, a couple of them say, you know, they were not able to compete with Washington State in terms of producing apples per pound. So they said organic was a way for them, they felt, to at least be kind of competitive. And there's a lot of tricks to growing a product organically with apples, like as to say like pecans, you know, because like with pecans, in some operations in Arizona, you know, there's minimal changes to their enterprise, and they can be certified as organically. But when it comes to like apples, and you have codling moth and things like that, growing organically becomes really kind of a challenge. You have to take a whole different approach in terms of your insect management, pheromones, and everything else. This might probably be the most important piece of information I share with you today. So what is this showing here? Okay, the red line there is showing essentially the total income of all U.S. households here on average. And then the yellow shows off-farm income of farm households, and the green is the farm earnings of farm households. So what does that look like? So in general, you can see the red line is above the total of off-farm and farm earnings of farm households for the earlier years, but in the later years, there, you know, it's above for the farmers, right? But what does it look like?
You had to have a second job?
Yeah, you don't want to quit your day job, right? Because, look, I mean, most of the income there, in terms of the cash income, comes from the off-farm income in farming here. It varies, and we'll show it here, but just keep that in mind. And then, so if you look at the commercial This is a little bit older, but yeah, I think still pretty much holds true today. If you look at the rural residential farms here on the bottom, the income from farming tends to be negative, on average. So the income from off-farm sources is actually above kind of average U.S. household income. In intermediate farms, you can see basically income from farming is almost zero. And then when you get into the commercial farms, that's when you get into where you have a larger portion of the income from farming as opposed to income from off-farm sources. So, I think that's important to just keep in mind that at least starting out in particular, you're probably going to have to rely on off-farm income, pretty heavily to get going, in particular. It's not like you just because you work, 24/7 at farming, that's going to pay all the bills, right, Miles?
Well, I'm wearing the big A t-shirt right now.
So, yeah. Off-farm income is very important. So just to kind of wrap up here, I guess, costs are very important in keeping track of them, and it's not just even in farming. If you're talking like, I'm doing this project with Gore on this Miles helped in this class as well, and the people there that work at Gore would say, well, they keep telling us, well, we have to make some money so we can at least come back and have fun again next year. Because if we're not making any money, then we can't come back and have this fun again. Basically, it's kind of the way they word it. So, I mean, if you're losing money, for the company in a particular activity, it suddenly doesn't become very fun to everybody, right? But you have to almost, make money to have the fun in the lifestyle to a certain extent, or else unless you have other resources to support it, then you've got to be able to generate a profit. And your marketing plan all comes into that, and everything. But just also remember, I guess, that you can have a plan, but you're probably going to be revising it and going through it, over time, so that it's not necessarily going to be. If you're not able to necessarily, I guess, follow the plan to which you set out to do 3 years ago, maybe there's an alternative plan that is something that you've been enlightened to along the way. So I guess, part of this class and a good portion of this class is just to help you try to, do the best shot at kind of which give you the best tools to make the best effort to succeed in what you want to do, but at the same time, you may have to adjust your plans to succeed. So